Everyone, Oridan here from Main Event Mic'd, here to discuss what was a very stacked weekend of professional wrestling or sports entertainment or whatever you like to call it. And it definitely was. This Saturday we had WWE Night of Champions. Then on Sunday we had AEW Forbidden Door, NXT Great American Bash, and TNA Slammiversary. And in this video I'm going to be discussing all of those shows. I was able to watch all of them. Pretty much give my thoughts on the shows overall. I might also give my thoughts on what transpired on Monday Night Raw last night as well. And yeah, when this weekend was on its way, I was feeling this is just, why is there so much wrestling? And I can kind of understand why people probably pick and choose what shows they would like to watch, especially if you're doing content creation. Because catching up with all of them is just going to be a headache, or just trying to see if you can do so. But I was able to do that, so that was 6 hours of WWE, 5 hours of AEW, and about 3 hours of TNA. TNA came out at a reasonable time on Sunday evening, so I was able to catch up and watch on that live. So probably the shows I watched live was Night of Champions and TNA Slammiversary. Everything else was just later on. But let's start off with I'll discuss AEW Forbidden Door first. This is a show where I feel like the concept of the Forbidden Door gimmick over the years has not been as strong as it used to. When this was created back then, I want to say 2022. I want to say it started in 2022. I think that's when it started. When the concept of AEW, New Japan working with each other, it was cool, because when of course the Elite left to start up AEW, of course they left on not the greatest of terms. But I think over the years you can kind of see that the partnership is kind of you could argue is a bit one-sided. I mean, let's be real. Like, all the wrestlers have moved from New Japan to AEW. If it's Kazuchika Okada moving there, Will Ospreay, Jay White, just to name a few. And of course there'll be AEW wrestlers who will go to New Japan and wrestle there as well. We had Will Ospreay and Okada go to Wrestle Kingdom, and also do other relationships with other organizations like CMLL. We see the likes of Claudio Castagnoli in a dual contract, Mystico in a dual contract, Persephone in a dual contract. So I just think over the years the concept of Forbidden Door isn't really a Forbidden Door, especially when you look at the only person that won on the show was Shota Umino. But overall, I thought this was a fantastic show. I thought this was a great show once again from AEW, who are continuing to give great pay-per-views every time they do so. Of course, the biggest complaint is probably the length of the show, which was nearly at 5 hours, which it is a problem. There was also one comment from a good friend in GWE Wrestling saying that no wrestling show should be 5 hours. Have you seen WrestleMania 33, 34, and 35? And this is where I'll say, if you're going to have a show that is super long, it depends on the quality. If you're having a show that is long and the quality is definitely dipping, and I think those 3 WrestleManias are prime examples, it's how you kind of format everything within the show to kind of keep the crowd alive. Double or Nothing is a prime example where, despite the show being long, the crowd was within nearly every single match on the show. Even with this show, even though I feel like they were kind of down for the Shota Umino Pac match. But it really depends on the quality of the show. If it carries it, then it's understandable. And I understand Tony Khan's concept of why these shows are long, because he wants to give the fans as much as he can, especially for these shows if they're paying for tickets or on pay-per-view as well. It can, of course, lead people to feel like, should I even watch this because of the length? Which is understandable, because if you're watching it live, the ending was around 1 a.m. US time for people that were there, and that's not really ideal, and maybe some other time zones could be different, and especially if you're in the UK like me, that's why I didn't watch this live, thank God. But despite the length, I still think this was still a great show from AEW, who continued to just give great pay-per-views. And let's just start off with the matches. We started off with the opening match. I didn't get the chance to watch the pre-show, but to start off with, the Young Bucks defeating Mystico and Masuke Dorada and Shingo Takagi and Titan. I thought this was a very, very fun triple threat 3-way match with lucha rules involved to an extent, and it's just really cool to see Mystico link up with the likes of the Young Bucks of Nick and Matt Jackson. But this was a really fun three-way that really got the crowd started. And then we had Kenny Omega versus Zack Sabre Jr., which for some reason I didn't even mention in the TikTok video about, which was another great match on the show. It was what it was. It was Kenny Omega trying to prove himself to still be in contention for the AEW World title by facing a familiar opponent in this Forbidden Door pay-per-views in Zack Sabre Jr., someone who I think is arguably one of the best technical wrestlers out there in wrestling. And you just saw the interchange of moves, Kenny Omega trying to go for moves while Zack Sabre Jr. was finding different ways to counter with submission threats and other things as well. They nearly got 30 minutes, but I thought this was overall a standout match on the show, with Kenny Omega getting the victory with a one-winged angel and potentially setting up maybe a redemption to capture the AEW World title, depending on what happens after this week's episode of AEW Dynamite, as AEW's next pay-per-view will be in Canada. So we'll see with that. Jon Moxley defeated Bandido for the Continental Championship, but I thought this was a really good match from both men. Moxley still holding on to the Continental title. Bandido, I think he's one of the best wrestlers out there in AEW, and I like the tag team he has with Brody King as well. The Death Riders continue to be maybe one of the most confusing groups, where they're either baby faces or they're heels or they're tweeners, and that's just Jon Moxley right now, especially with this whole thing that he has with Will Ospreay, which we'll get towards the end of the show. But this was also a really good match on the card. Shota Umino defended his IWGP Global Heavyweight Championship against Pac, probably the biggest win, or maybe the only win that the New Japan people had. This was a good match. The crowd was a bit slow. You could maybe feel they were a bit tired, but they picked up at the end, and this was a really good match with Shota Umino retaining the championship and him actually meeting Jon Moxley for the first time in years. I remember when Moxley was in New Japan and he was always with Shota Umino, and then we had Hiroshi Tanahashi come out. The way, maybe this is just me, but the way Tanahashi was walking made me think, wow, how did you wrestle in January with Okada? But cool to see Tanahashi out as well. Tekla defended her AEW Women's World Championship against Starlight Kid, a feud which has been continuing from the Stardom since her leaving from Stardom. I briefly talked about it on TikTok about the history of Tekla, why she has a hatred towards Stardom, why she hates idol culture, why she hates the President Okada so much that he pretty much fears her in his nightmares. But thought this was another really good match too. I think in this video you're going to probably see that there was a lot of good women's matches throughout all the companies, but this one was a really good match here. Starlight Kid really looked good, as well as Tekla. I think Tekla's done a great job of kind of adjusting and making her character in the ring as well as outside of the ring too, especially with her character. Definitely one of the highlights of AEW's women's division currently right now. After the match, she removed Starlight Kid's mask, spat in it, and just threw it into the Stardom president's face. Just great heel work from Tekla. Interesting to see what. We'll probably get to it when we get to the Owen Hart finals, but it'll be interesting to see what AEW does with Tekla as they continue on with this title reign. And I've been enjoying it, and I've been enjoying Tekla so far this year. We had Cope and Christian defending their AEW World Tag Team Championships against the Dogs. This was a decent match. If I were to say which match was the weakest, it's probably this one. It was fine, it was good. Probably the biggest moment was the return of Switchblade Jay White. Well, first it was, we saw the Bang Bang Gang come out, and then we saw Jay White, who's been gone for nearly 14 months. Really happy to see Jay White back. Someone who has been missed, really been missed, and it has just been very unfortunate with the injuries that he's had, especially this injury too. But it'll be very interesting to see Jay White back in AEW, back within the fold as well, and I'm really looking forward to that. But with Cope and Christian, they retain their championships. I feel like the end game, and this is going back to the opening match of AEW Forbidden Door, the Young Bucks are clearly on a destination to get the tag team championships back, and could be setting up a match between Cope and Christian, potentially at All in London. I thought it would be a three-way with FTR, but with FTR wanting to take a break from wrestling for the time being, I feel like that could be a setup. And who knows, with the potential of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, who I do believe their contracts, their non-compete finish off before redemption before All In, so you could, but we will see. Or maybe they'll just do a big angle where they show up at All In, but who knows. Then we get to arguably what I think is going to be one of my favorite matches of this whole weekend, or probably my favorite match of the whole year. It's Mercedes Moné versus Maya Wilde. This was the Women's Owen Hart Cup final, where the winner would get an opportunity at the title at All In London at Wembley Stadium. I wasn't too familiar with Maya Wilde. I've seen a few of her matches. I saw the match with Athena, but this one I thought was just great. This was just a great match, and I think what made it great was the crowd feeding into the Cinderella story for Maya Wilde. It was pretty evident that Mercedes Moné was going to win this match, but the fact that the fans bought into it, they bought into the match, they bought into the chemistry of both Mercedes and Maya. There was some mishaps during the match where there was some slight miss of communication from both women, but I thought they delivered a great match and a great story. I really liked the expressions that Mercedes Moné showed in the match, where she showed faces of just disbelief and desperation, especially when she was having submission holds against Maya Wilde, or just moments where she was trying to get the victory. I thought she did a great job there, and Maya just did a great job of being the underdog that the crowd bought into. There was a really crazy spot, or really brutal spot, where she did a sunset flip powerbomb onto the floor to Mercedes Moné, and one of my favorite moments of the match was when Mercedes had Maya in a submission, and the crowd are literally cheering Maya to get to the rope. And that's one of the best things I like about wrestling, just those moments that they can capture. It's just the crowd chanting for Maya to get to the ropes. It's Mercedes' desperation in her face to try and get this victory against someone who she thought she could just beat very easily, but is showing to the fact that she really can't. But overall, Mercedes was able to get the submission after 24 minutes. And Mercedes is now a two-time Women's Owen Hart Cup winner. She will be going to All In to challenge for the AEW Women's World Championship, the one title she has not won in AEW so far. If we are going to get Tekla versus Mercedes, it's going to be interesting because they're both heels. I think since Mercedes has returned from AEW, she hasn't really changed her character. So it'll be interesting to see when we do get Tekla Mercedes, how that interchanges, how that looks. But should be intriguing. But overall, I love this match. This is easily one of my favorite women's matches of this year. I would probably still put Saya Kamitani versus Carrara at Stardom, All Queendom, above this a bit. But this was a great match and a great showcase for Maya Wilde, who I hope with this match kind of goes on to do bigger and bigger things. That's where I kind of look at TKN to see what do you have next for her. And it seems like they have something planned for her, because as soon as that match ended, we had a promo with Athena, pretty much belittling Maya Wilde and saying that she'll never get her title and whatnot. And it makes me think, are they potentially setting up Maya Wilde to finally end the streak, which is Athena's Ring of Honor Forever Women's World Championship run? I want to see how many days this woman is this belt for. Because it's been, and it won't surprise me, but I don't know if that is something that I am super intrigued as the next step, because it's like Maya Wilde has just had an incredible match on pay-per-view, and you're putting her back into Ring of Honor. No, mind you, Athena's great. So 1,294 days, mad. But I don't know if I like, it would be a great moment and a great feather in her career. I kind of wish that you have her in this division. She's super over right now. I feel like get her involved in other things in AEW, but I think that's the clear setup, that she's going to potentially beat Athena and break the record, and break the long streak that she's had. But yeah, I really, really enjoyed that match. Kudos to both women. Then we had a Death's Door match, which featured Team Briscoe of Mark Briscoe, Orange Cassidy, Roderick Strong, Kyle O'Reilly, the international champion in Konosuke Takeshita and Darby Allin, facing the team of the Don Callis family in MJF, Kevin Knight, Kyle Fletcher, Jack Doyle, Kazuchika Okada, and Andrade El Idolo. I really like the setup of the cage where it went around the ring. This was just a chaotic steel cage match with a lot of spots. You had thumbtacks, you had crazy spots, you had people going through tables 10 foot above the cage. We had Leo Rush come out of nowhere. It was supposed to be the secret weapon, but it was the weapon that was against the team of the Don Callis MJF team. And it's cool to see that AEW are trusting Leo Rush in these small moments, and it clearly shows that they have trusted this character. A character that I don't think will end up becoming an AEW World Champion. but a character that AEW trusts, that this is a character that Lio Rush has made that is getting over with the fans, and he's being sprinkled into these moments. He did this especially in the Stadium Stampede at Double or Nothing, and now he's done it here. We saw the confrontation of Okada and Konosuke Takeshita, Darby Allin and MJF, Mark Briscoe and MJF, and also the complete dysfunction of the Don Callis family and just Andrade's unsettlement of just not wanting to play ball with MJF and wanting the AEW World title, which led to the dismay of the Don Callis family and MJF, where Andrade pretty much betrayed MJF, kicked Jack Doyle in the nuts, and pretty much excommunicated himself from the Don Callis family, and it allowed Briscoe to get the victory against Jack Doyle with the pinfall, and now he has a AEW World title opportunity, which he has cashed in for this Wednesday at AEW Dynamite after the match. This was a very fun, chaotic steel cage match, with everyone getting a moment to shine in the match as well. We had a lot of moments that was very fun. I think Konosuke Takeshita was trying to get something out of the bag and just flipped the middle finger to Okada, which even got Okada to laugh a bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. This was a very fun match and another highlight from the pay-per-view. Then we got the main event. Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland, the men's Owen Hart Cup final, where the winner would go on to challenge for the AEW World title at All in London. Swerve Strickland is someone who's very familiar to All in London, main eventing the Forbidden Door, All in 2024 against Bryan Danielson, entering as the world champion. And for Will Ospreay, this is him wanting to have the opportunity to be at London to win the world title in front of his hometown people. Both men came in DC character inspired characters. Will Ospreay came as Bane, which I thought was a cool entrance, and Swerve Strickland came out as Lobo as well. Overall, this was a different type of match than what they had back in 2024 at Forbidden Door. Forbidden Door 2024, and then also the second match at Summer Blockbuster last year. Very physical. It started off, as you would think, quick moves between Will Ospreay and Swerve Strickland, but then it later developed into just these two beating the crap out of each other. Will Ospreay, of course, learning what he got from the Death Riders, being more violent, trying to go against arguably the self-proclaimed dangerous man in AEW, which is Swerve Strickland. Swerve Strickland going after the neck of Will Ospreay. Both of them just completely bleeding. There was a lot of blood in this match. A very physical match. A lot of physical spots. A lot of crazy spots. But then as the match developed, the crowd was still biting into nearly everything they were doing. Just near falls after near falls. You could argue the near falls got a bit too much, a bit near fall heavy. It reminded me of Johnny Gargano versus Adam Cole at NXT TakeOver New York, where I loved that match. Did it get too heavy-handed with the near falls in that match? Yes, and this one was maybe a bit similar. I kind of looked at it as that when in Forbidden Door 2024, Swerve threw everything at Will Ospreay to get the victory. Nearly every move he had, as Will was completely exhausted. But this was a different Will Ospreay, a Will Ospreay who was motivated to go into London and have the opportunity to win the world title, as well as Swerve. Two people that know each other very, very well. That's what made this match very special and worked so well, in my opinion. You then had the Death Riders come out later on in the match to try and push Will. Swerve hit a house call kick, and then Will just immediately, as he was trying to sell it, looked at Jon Moxley and just started to power up, and you could feel the crowd powering up and everything as well. After multiple moves of near falls, Will Ospreay finally hit the Tiger Driver 91 to get the victory and to win the men's Owen Hart Cup tournament and to go on to All in London. They had a little exchange, which I don't think they kind of, you can maybe match it by maybe how they're speaking, but I think Will was telling to Swerve that it's one win, one draw, and one win to you apiece. Let's run it back when, let's say for example, I win the belt. He was celebrating with the Don Callis family, then his wife came out with Alex Windsor. I do like the small, noticeable touches that they do. It's clear that Alex Windsor still doesn't trust the Death Riders. And it makes you think, what is the end goal of what Jon Moxley's trying to do to push Will Ospreay to become the AEW World Champion and to go into this violent state? Could this be a thing where Jon Moxley sees, like, you know what? If Will Ospreay wins that title, the title belongs back to the Death Riders, and maybe down the line he turns heel, goes after Will for the belt, and because he knows he's beaten Will twice once in a New Japan show and once at Dynasty, that it might be easy pickings for him. Um, but yeah, like I said, this was a great show from AEW. I really enjoyed this pay-per-view. Um, Once again, another strong pay-per-view from AEW. Like I said, I think the concept of the Forbidden Door shows are kind of going a bit thin because like like for example, Yota Tsuji, the IWGP Heavyweight Champion, isn't well. It's a bit of kayfabe, but maybe not kayfabe. But he pretty much said he has no interest in working with AEW. Doesn't really see it as a benefit, um, which you could respect for the fact that he wanted to stay in Japan and just do things in Japan. Um, and it was cool to see some of these wrestlers see here. If it was Mystico, if it's Masuke Dorado, who we've seen multiple times, Shota Umino, Starlight Kid, who I thought did a pretty good job. But I think straight after that, it was just straight AEW matches. But overall, this was a great pay-per-view. Yes, the length is a problem. Like I said earlier, I think it depends on the quality of the show. If it can carry the pay-per-view, then it can do then it can be a great job. And I think AEW does it pretty well in terms of carrying the quality despite the lengths of these shows. But yeah, those are my thoughts on AEW Forbidden Door. Really, really enjoyed this show. If I was to give it out of 10, I think an 8.5 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed the show. I probably enjoyed Double or Nothing a bit more. I enjoyed this more than Dynasty and maybe a bit more than Revolution, but this was still a great show, so I was really, really happy. Next on, let's talk about, let's go with WWE Night of Champions, which took place this Saturday. Of course, the biggest moment of that show, and just to kind of start it off, was Sami Zayn becoming the new undisputed WWE champion. Something I never thought I would see. In the 20 years of Sami Zayn's career or more, where I've seen him as El Generico in Ring of Honor, his NXT run, which I thought was pretty good, especially his chase for the NXT championship, and now here, even if him winning the IC title at WrestleMania 40 and other stories as well, him involving himself with Kevin Owens, the bloodline and everything, for him to finally become the undisputed WWE champion is something I didn't think was going to happen. And I'll have to say I have to give kudos to WWE for pulling that trigger on Sami Zayn, especially on the show. I always had a feeling that if he was going to become world champion or a WWE champion, it would possibly be WrestleMania 43, because that is where it will be taking place in Saudi Arabia. But yeah, overall, I really, really enjoyed the fact that he won it, and it's something completely different. I think it's something that they needed. I don't hate Cody Rhodes. I'm a Cody Rhodes fan, but I just haven't been super impressed with him since he's had the championship. I think his feud with Kevin Owens was pretty good. His matches with AJ Styles was pretty good to great. But as a champion, he just doesn't really move me with the belt. He's had the belt 3 times now. I think he doesn't need to get the belt immediately back anytime soon. Let's keep the belt away from him. Yes, he's the QB1. Yes, he's one of Triple H's chosen ones, but just give him some time away from the belt. We'll see how things go with that as well. But yeah, the main event of Night of Champions, I think, was arguably one of the best things about the show, in my opinion. Really good match with all 3 men. I did think before that the whole thing with Cody and Gunther was a bit, we want to do this feud, but we don't want Gunther to lose dramatically, so we just have him lose in spots where it keeps him strong. If it was the ropes, his foot was on the bottom ropes at Clash in Italy. Sami Zayn just doing Sami Zayn things as the referee, but yeah, Sami Zayn is the new undisputed WWE champion. Gunther seems like he's going to be going after Nick Aldis, which should be interesting. And yeah, Sami Zayn is the new undisputed WWE champion. Congrats to him. The rest of the show, Obafemi defeated Jey Uso to become the King of the Ring winner, in a match which made me think I probably would have wished if Javon Evans was in this spot than Jey Uso. I've already talked about Jey Uso, I think, a few times. I think even maybe me and Billy talked about... I don't think we did. We didn't talk about Jey Uso. I think Jey Uso is over. And I have no problems with Jey Uso being over and whatnot. I just kind of feel like how he is, how over he is, it just doesn't match his skill set. And I mean, in terms of how he is as a wrestler. I don't think he's a great wrestler. I don't think he's great on the mic. I think he's charismatic and he can carry something and he has emotion. But that's just kind of how it is with me with Jey. No discredit to him winning the world title and the Royal Rumble. No one can take that away from Jey Uso. But I watched this match going, I probably would have wished Javon was here. because it would have been something to kind of establish Javon Evans as someone that has been in this level to be in a King of the Ring final, so that maybe down the line you can kind of build something up later on. But they put Jey Uso because he's the popular choice, and that's fine. But Obafemi winning was the right choice. Io Sky defeated Liv Morgan in the Queen of the Ring tournament final. Liv Morgan being in the Queen of the Ring tournament as the Women's World Champion doesn't really make any sense to me, and I don't think anyone knows if it makes any sense. But just kind of proves that WWE don't really have anything they can do with Liv Morgan right now in terms of challengers. But it seems like they do have a challenger in Io Sky, and that match has been set up for SummerSlam. I thought both of these tournament finals were fine. Well, I thought the Obafemi and Jey Uso match was what it was. Jey Uso just throwing a lot of offense on Obafemi, which Obafemi was able to dismantle and, of course, get the victory. And Io and Liv was a decent match, not anything crazy, but it was decent with Io Sky getting the victory. Liv trying to go after Io Sky's knee. There was a big sell on that, but yeah. And Seth Rollins versus Braun Breaker in a steel cage match. Seth Rollins getting the victory and pretty much setting up a match with Roman Reigns at SummerSlam. That was one of the big things I was thinking about. If Seth is beating Braun, what is it to do? Is it to challenge Roman? And that is clear. And I think the big question is, what do you do with Braun Breaker now? You could arguably say that his momentum back in November, he was very, very high, especially with his momentum, where he was going in terms of his character, in terms of what things were going to happen for him. He was more over back then. But now it's just a thing where his momentum's dipped. The vision isn't as strong as it was before then because they've been cursed with so many injuries. Austin Theory hasn't really done. I mean, yeah, you've given him tag team championships and whatnot, and surrounded himself in like with the likes of Paul Heyman, and kind of being a main event group to an extent, but hasn't really done anything with it since. Logan Paul is Logan Paul. Bronson Reed is currently out injured. But yeah, the case is, what is next for Braun Breaker coming after this feud? I kind of feel like his momentum has kind of dipped since then. I feel like these was kind of the low points of the show, and maybe the biggest crux of the show was the crowd. Them not really being invested in these mid-card title matches. They're invested in Trick Williams' entrance, but you can kind of feel like the crowd was dead. Trick and Ricky, they had a decent match. Then after the match, Lil Yachty hit Ricky Saints with a people's elbow. Not very Snoop Dogg-like, but he did his own right. And Tiffany Stratton retained her women's United States Championship match against Jade Cargill. I think both of the crowd just weren't really involved into these matches, and I think that's kind of the scary bit of a WrestleMania in Saudi Arabia. Will they care about some of these mid-card matches? Will the crowd be dead? That's something for WWE to kind of look over. But yeah, like I said, I thought the main event between Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes, and Gunther was pretty good. I think if it wasn't for that, this would still be a pretty above-average show overall. This was a decent show overall, which was helped by, I think, a really good main event and a crazy moment of Sami Zayn becoming the undisputed WWE champion. I would say, yeah, if I was to give this out of 10, probably a 7. I think a 7 out of 10 is reasonable for the show. Some people might go lower, but I think a 7 is reasonable, especially with the main event kind of helping it. And I thought Seth versus Braun was a good steel cage match that started slow, but then developed to be a pretty good match. I feel like the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I felt like the first 5 matches kind of started with a slow pace, then built itself up, apart from, let's say, the triple threat match. But yeah, those are my thoughts on WWE Night of Champions. A decent show overall, a decent PLE as we reach to the road to WrestleMania. TNA Slammiversary took place this Sunday. It's his 24th anniversary of the show. Of course, they were also paying respects to Joe Doran at the start of the show as well. So RIP to Joe. Starting off, I thought this was a good show. I think TNA has kind of been the laughing stock for the last few weeks, especially with what has been going on. The loss of, I'll say the loss, but of Tommy Dreamer leaving as a head of creative, losing Tessa Blanchard, losing Steve McLaren, losing Maya Grace, potentially going to be losing Mike Santana, depending on how we're looking, how this main event looks, and that's kind of just been the thing about TNA. They've been a company that has been able to survive despite all the obstacles that have been thrown around them over the decades. If it's losing some of their top talent to other wrestlers, to other companies, or just the amount of things that have happened, they've been able to survive. And this pay-per-view is maybe a prime example of a good show, but we'll be interested to see where TNA goes straight after this. I thought the Ultimate X match was really good. I thought this was a really good way to start the show. Really cool to see Amazing Red back for this match. The finish kind of made me roll my eyes, as like, this is the classic TNA finish where I believe it was Amazing Red and Leon Slater going for the belts. They both hold on to the belts. Leon Slater's holding on to the belt for like 1 or 2 seconds, and then Cedric Alexander takes the belt to kind of claim the win. Just kind of like a weird finish, but whatever. And then after the match, TNA played a promo package for Amazing Red to confirm that he will be part of the TNA Hall of Fame in October, which is clearly deserved. Amazing Red has been an exceptional wrestler, especially in his generation, and has definitely influenced a lot of the wrestlers that you see in the X Division, or just cruiserweight wrestlers or wrestlers of his size to this generation. So congratulations to him. Conan has also been inducted into the Hall of Fame, so congratulations to him too. Elijah defeated AJ Francis in a singles match where if Elijah lost, he would have lost literally everything about him. He would have lost his name, his likeness, and music catalog to AJ Francis. We saw expressions come out, which I did not expect, but then I remembered he was doing content with AJ Francis when he went for WrestleMania weekend, so that was kind of cool to see. Rosemary and Ali won the TNA Knockouts Championships against the Elegance brand. Mustafa Ali faced the likes of Rich Swann and Uhaa Nation, formerly known as Apollo Crews, who is joining TNA since being released from WWE. This was a fun triple threat match with Mustafa Ali getting the victory, but it is cool to see Uhaa Nation in TNA. I think he's a good addition to the company, so it'll be interesting to see how things go. He had a little bit of interaction with Moose before going into his match. Moose defeated Eddie Edwards in a no surrender match. Xia Brookside won the TNA Knockouts Women's World Championship against Young Lee. The Broken Hardys defended their titles in a 4-way ladder match with just a lot of chaotic moments that you know from the Hardy Boys, especially the classic Jeff Hardy Swanton Bomb threw a wrestler through 2 tables. How old is Jeff Hardy? And he's still doing his spots. 48, jeez. But that was fun too, and I thought a really good main event between Mike Santana and Nick Nemeth for the TNA World Championship. This was Nick Nemeth's last shot, his last opportunity, him cashing in his Call Your Shot Championship opportunity. Who had involvement with Nick Nemeth's brother, but I think overall this was a really good main event with Nick Nemeth claiming the TNA World title back and maybe signaling that this could potentially make Mike Santana WWE bound. It's been rumored that WWE have been interested in Mike Santana and that he's finishing up his time in TNA to potentially go to WWE. If that is the case, I've been happy with what Mike Santana has done since leaving AEW to kind of bet on himself, to kind of get to the position that he's in as a singles wrestler and kind of have this momentum that he's done in TNA and even in the indies. WWE will be intriguing, but I'm kind of fearful because I'm looking at the wrestlers that WWE have brought in from TNA. If it's Jordan Grace, kind of spent too much of her time in NXT and now she's on main event for some reason. Joe Hendry's just floating around in WWE, but Mike Santana, we'll see. I don't have the biggest expectations of how he'll do. I think potentially he'll start in NXT. He'll be a good addition to that men's division in NXT. So I think that will be kudos to him. But yeah, TNA was good. It was a good show. Out of 10, I'll give it like a 7.5. I didn't really hate this show apart from maybe a few decisions. This was a fine show with a lot of good matches. I think the main event was pretty good. I liked the Ultimate X match. I liked the triple threat for the TNA International Championship. And surprisingly, I thought the Elijah versus AJ Francis match was actually not that bad. But and then there's some other matches that were good too. If it was Xia Brookside winning the TNA Knockouts Championship. But yeah, good show from TNA Slammiversary. On to the final show of this stacked weekend. It is NXT Great American Bash. NXT for some reason just love to do PLEs on the exact same day as AEW do PLEs, and this was proven by their announcement straight after the show, where on August 30th, which will be the same day as All in London, we will be getting NXT Heatwave and a AAA show on August 30th. This can't be coincidence. I refuse to believe this is coincidence, but hey, whatever. This was also a good show as well. I think my thing with NXT is that I like where it's currently going, where it is clearly the developmental show. It's clearly to build superstars for tomorrow. And I think it's best to be that way. I do, of course, miss the black and gold days, but I think where NXT is as a company and as a developmental brand, it's probably best to be where it has to be. But overall, like I said, I thought the show was good with some matches that really stood out, especially that main event. But first, I'm going to talk about the start of the show. Tony D'Angelo versus Evil. I thought this was a decent start to the show. Tony D'Angelo defending his championship against Evil. I thought Zyra versus Tatum Paxley was a good match, with Zyra retaining the championship, and it's potentially being rumored that Tatum Paxley is main roster ready after this. I think Zyra's done a good job of kind of adjusting from being away from Sol Ruka, being on her own with the North American Championship. So that was a good match. Shyla Hill defeated Tristan Angels in a decent match. Warren Sinclair defended her Women's Speed Championship. The match was fine. Nothing crazy against Ariana Grace, who is the daughter of Santino Marella. Shakur and Sugars defeated Dion Lennox, who was part of Dark State group, who got kicked out of the group. As soon as the match ended, just got beat up again. I'm not crazy about the Dark State group. I'm cool with Sugars kind of being on his ones. He kind of seems like the more intriguing person out of the group. In terms of being a character on the mic, and also he's a good wrestler too. I don't really care for Dark State. I kind of feel like Dark State is annoying. I've had a hatred for Dark State ever since they interfered in that Leon Slater versus Javon Evans match. I will forever hate them for that. But match was fine. Miles Bourne versus Trevor Heights was a cool match for the North American Championship. And arguably one of my favorite matches of the show, or probably the best match of the show, is Kindle Gray versus Lola Vice for the NXT Women's Championship. They had a lot of good matches before, but I think this was arguably their best one. Lola Vice has adapted really well into WWE. From, of course, transitioning from an MMA background into WWE. Been featured a lot, especially in the AAA shows and also in other places as well. And Kindle Gray, she's the one. I feel like she is potentially the one. She has a bright future. I think the one thing she probably needs to adjust is maybe her character a bit, but as a wrestler, fantastic. At her age, 25, and she wrestles exceptionally well. I know Dave Meltzer is very huge on her. I nickname her, well, in my head, I nickname her Kindle Omega. But yeah, this was a great match, and she wins the NXT Women's Championship. Makes you to think, is Lola Vice main roster ready as well? Because it seems like when it comes to these move-ups, they happen out of nowhere. And Shawn Michaels has to adjust. But congrats to Kindle Gray, who, like I said, has a bright future. And congrats to all the women. There was a lot of great matches, especially from the women. If it was Mercedes Moné Maya World, if it was Tekla versus Starlight Kid, if it was this match between Kindle Gray and Lola Vice. But yeah, really enjoyed this. And this was also a good show as well. I'm feeling a 7.5 on this show too. The only thing is that it's best for them just to be on days where they can kind of showcase themselves, because it leads yourself to comparisons. And I thought the Forbidden Door show was better than the NXT show. And when you allow the comparisons to show, the quality is going to show itself. I just think AEW has, of course, a bigger roster than NXT. NXT is the developmental brand, but I just don't really get the motivation or the reason why they always have, why they mostly have NXT shows counter program with AEW. Just whatever. But Tony Khan took it as a compliment when I believe he was asked in the post AEW Forbidden Door show. But yeah, those are my thoughts on all the 4 shows that happened. If I had to rank them, Hmm. I think I'm gonna put Night of Champions last, but that's not a bad thing. The show was decent. Um, Great moment with Sami Zayn winning the Undisputed WWE Championship. Number three, I'll put I'll put Great American Bash. Number two, I'll put Slammiversary, and number one, I'll put Forbidden Door. My favorite men's match of the whole weekend is probably gonna lean towards Swerve Strickland and Will Ospreay. I really enjoyed that match. It's probably going to be up there as one of my favorite matches of this year. Favorite women's match, there was a lot of good matches. Like if it was Lola Vice, Kindle Grey, Starlight Kid, and Tekla. But I'm going to go with Mercedes Moné and Maya World. Congrats to those two women for delivering an exceptional match. And moment of the weekend is probably Sami Zayn winning the Undisputed WWE Championship. But yeah. Quickly wanted to talk about Monday Night Raw. Two things that have just developed on Monday Night Raw. It's big indications for SummerSlam this year. So, on the opening segment of Monday Night Raw, we got the confirmation of Obafemi versus Brock Lesnar 3. And it will be inside Hell in a Cell. Ironically, Billy predicted this, and I have receipts. June 3rd, 2026, early June, where Billy clearly wasn't really feeling wrestling, but he was seeing some clips and was like, it wouldn't surprise me if he sees it in Hell in a Cell. And glory behold, he has predicted it. Of course, the big question is Obafemi relinquishing and sacrificing his championship opportunity that he won after winning the King of the Ring, which is a choice. It's something where I look at it and I'm like, I get it. To an extent, it's almost just, it's kind of like, it's 50-50. I can understand people being frustrated about it because it goes against the rules of the King of the Ring. But I could also understand that Obafemi needs to deal with this Brock Lesnar situation, which is Brock Lesnar. If Obafemi was, let's say, for example, to go for a championship opportunity, what's going to stop Brock Lesnar in hindsight from preventing that from happening and ruining his opportunity? So I also see this as Obafemi wanting to finally get rid of Brock Lesnar. If it means competing and facing him in Hell in a Cell, then fine. And I think this is the good usage of Hell in a Cell now that WWE are doing. We're not seeing Hell in a Cell as abruptly as we're doing it. I think the last time we saw was the Punk and Drew McIntyre match, which was fantastic. So adding this stipulation, despite Billy telling me that this was going to happen, caught me by surprise. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to the trilogy, the final match between Obafemi and Brock Lesnar. I can understand the frustration of Obafemi taking away his opportunity, but as he said in the promo, the championships will always be there. I think Obafemi will definitely hold a world or a WWE championship down the line. It kind of just frees everything up for the time being as Obafemi goes on to finally end the Brock Lesnar situation, which he is in. So, and to be fair, you can kind of clearly see that Brock Lesnar is trying to put over Obafemi as much as he can if it's in the promos. I thought what was very funny from Brock is him saying, like, I'm not that very good at promos, that's why Paul Heyman does the job for me, which was funny and hilarious. But, and him just saying, I don't watch the shows, Paul Heyman just updates me on stuff. But yeah, and then of course, what I think will be the Night 2 main event, sorry to whoever is the Undisputed WWE Champion, Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins. A match which I feel like WWE have been trying to have this be a WrestleMania match for such a long period of time. They've wrestled each other before in the past, if it was back in 2016, I could be wrong. Yeah, 2016, when Seth Rollins came back from that injury, and WWE decided we're not going to turn him face immediately, we're just going to keep him as a heel for the time being. That's Seth Rollins. They had another one, I think, at the Royal Rumble 20. I'm trying to get. It's when Seth Rollins came out in in Shield gear to just play mind games. And this was teased ever since Roman won the world title, and we're finally here. Looking forward to see what they'll do with these two. It's a dream match, a match which we have seen before multiple times, but I am looking forward to see what Roman and Seth does to finally get this match again. Of course, there'll be involvement with, let's say, the Bloodline, and I think that might be something to do with what Roman Reigns whispered to Jacob Fatu a few weeks ago. But yeah, so far that is the setup. We have Roman Reigns versus Seth Rollins for the welterweight title, Obafemi versus Brock Lesnar, and Liv Morgan finally defending her women's world championship against Io Sky. And we're on the road to SummerSlam. Makes you to think what Sami Zayn's going to be doing at SummerSlam, probably against Cody Rhodes. It's probably going to happen. But yeah, those are my thoughts on what was a very busy weekend of wrestling. Just wanted to share my thoughts. It, yeah, it's if anyone was able to listen to this and got some enjoyment, I thank you for listening through this whole of me just talking for about nearly over 45 minutes. Like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what was your favorite match from any of the shows that you watched over the weekend, your favorite moments, what you're looking forward to ahead of the road to SummerSlam, the road to All In London, and just anything in general. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe. I've been Aridin from Main Event Mic'd, and I will catch you guys, and maybe me and Billy later on down the line. See ya.